I'm Craig Timm, and welcome to a very special ACAMS Live, ACAMS Connect Crypto and Payment crossover episode. So for those of you who don't know, ACAMS Connect Crypto and Payments is a series that we just recently launched. It's a mix of both virtual and in-person events for anyone who's interested in the future of finance and its financial crime implications. They're designed to be short, responsive, interactive, and hopefully a lot of fun. So normally these events are only open to ACAMS members, but today I wanted to give everyone a sneak peek because there is a lot happening in the crypto space right now, and it's impacting all parts of the globe. So in the spirit of being interactive, feel free to tell us in the chat where you're joining from. Feel free to engage with others, put questions in the chat. I will try to monitor. I've got my phone here, so if you see me look down, I'm looking for your questions. We'll try to get to those throughout. But to talk to us today about crypto and why all anti-financial crime professionals should care about it and get educated about it, I am joined by Amanda Wick. For those of you who spend a lot of time here on LinkedIn, I'm sure many of you are already familiar with Amanda. If you don't, she's definitely someone you should follow. She's a former federal prosecutor, former chief legal affairs officer at Chainalysis, former congressional staffer, and currently the founder and CEO of the Association for Women in Cryptocurrency. She's also an author. Her new book, The Catalyst: Accelerating Forces, Forging the New World Financial Order, is available on Amazon and probably other places too. But Amanda, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was an honor to be asked to be your inaugural guest for this very cool thing that you're starting.
Well, awesome. So these are going to be short, responsive, so I'm not going to bury the lead. So we're going to jump right in. I'm sure that of the people watching today, I'm sure there's a spectrum with both their knowledge about crypto and their opinions about it, because certain people have very strong opinions. But with this first question, I'm thinking maybe you can sort of target it at the people in the middle. Maybe they understand it a little bit. Maybe they've even used it, but they're not in the cryptoverse. So why is now the time that they should really start caring about what's happening in crypto and trying to understand it better?
Yeah, so it's really funny. I think, and I'm going to try to keep my answer short because I know how much you want to cover. I think the very short TLDR answer is because now you have the mash of the technology is moving, the use cases are there, the regulation is coming, and we're finally starting to get that momentum where the culture of kind of like speculation and crap coin is finally kind of being pushed aside for the technological improvements, the future of digital finance, it being taken seriously, and stewards of the industry finally being in a place where it's like, we want this regulation, we want to move forward, and everything's kind of happening, everything everywhere all at once. And so, even though a lot of us were saying for years, please know this, please get educated, right? When I was at Chainalysis, we tried to do tons of education. People felt like, well, I really don't have to do this because this is a fad that'll disappear. And I think now, when the Genius Act, once clarity comes, when all these things are happening, and now there's this momentum, it's like, please do not keep thinking this is a fad because the train already left the station. Now it's just moving fast. And if you don't grab on, you will 100% be left behind.
What is it about now? Like, what do you think? Like, what is the convergence of fat? Like, I'm just wondering, like, because it has been like a lot of people have probably been like, well, I heard this before. Like, I've gotten all excited with all of the sort of ups and downs of the ride. Why now? For the skeptical one out there who's like, I don't know, what is it about this moment?
Yeah, so I think what's about this moment is that the problem that crypto had is that a lot of the use cases weren't directly relevant to Americans, right? Like it was very hard to get Congress people to understand why crypto mattered because unless it was their nephew trying to tell them about Fartcoin or right, like people talking about Bitcoin as a replacement for the US dollar, which you can imagine how well that went over in Congress, it just didn't seem to be like, well, how does this benefit the US and Americans? That changed with stable coins, which are a type of cryptocurrency that took out the volatility, that kept the technological improvement to the rails, to the speed of payments, right? So when you're talking about payments being faster, cheaper, and being very beneficial, well, now you're talking about e-commerce and improvements to payment rails that haven't happened for decades. Now you're seeing major financial institutions invest in stablecoin technology or permission blockchains. You're seeing the combination of like what would kind of be TradFi adopting the technology, admitting its usefulness, and crypto kind of saying, like, look, the kind of like crazy libertarian bent and the things that kind of made us seem like not legitimate to people, like we're moving away from that in order to get global adoption because we're willing to recognize we need regulation. We can't have the anonymous free flow of money. Like you're seeing kind of like this convergence. If you're a Marvel fan, I like to talk about it like Thor Dark World, where everything kind of aligns all at once. And that's when you finally get the moment that matters, right? And you can look at the legislation that's happening in the United States. You can see Congress people, especially on the Democrat side, who started to understand the concept of stable coins are usually backed by liquid dollar reserves like treasury bills. And when we started telling Congress people that the stablecoin market was like the 19th largest purchaser of treasury bills. If you like dollar dominance, if you like your job being relevant as a congressperson, well, now you suddenly start to care about stablecoins. So I think it was that kind of like really started to push it forward, like the use case, the payments improvements, and starting to get people to kind of say like this is legit. Now we all say crypto, but that clumps in a lot of
Yeah.
things, and that is one of the problems. Is that the kind of remnants of bad crypto are what people tend to think about. But I'm really hoping, and obviously that's why the Association for Women in Crypto never changed our name and never will. The good parts of crypto are the parts that I think are moving forward. And that's really, I think, one of the big reasons why people need to start learning about it, right? And I always analogize it. I stole this from a guy at Ledger, and I forget his name, Ian, I think. But like, it's like Napster and the evolution of digital music, right? I don't know about you, but I was in college. Napster comes out. I'm like, I'm pre-law. I know this is wildly illegal. I'm downloading all the songs I can get my grubby little hands on before that gravy train is over. And then you had LimeWire, and then you had Kazaa, right? And there are kids today who have Apple Music and Spotify who have no idea that none of that would have happened but for Napster and that evolution. And that's what we're going through with finance. Someday, right? People are going to be like, city who, like, but we got to get to wherever we're going to get to. And so now we're at this like moment where we're starting to get recognition of, hey, digital finance is the future, the same way digital music was the future.
Yeah, and so I really like what you said there about, when you're in the midst of a technological change, it feels like it's happening so slow, right? It feels like it's taking forever, right? It's like, for those with the internet and those things, like it feels like it's not. But then when you take a step back, or when you look back at it, you're like, wow, the world changed in 15 years, and that's actually not that long. And I think you've hit on it. I think stablecoins is the thing. I think the Genius Act in the US that brought a regulatory framework, a licensing framework, AML requirements, importantly, requirements that even non-registered stablecoin issuers will have to comply with lawful orders. That's a big deal. You've got, I think, Hong Kong's stablecoin framework goes live on Friday. We've got MiCA in the UK. So you're finally taking the most obvious use case in stablecoins and payments and bringing it into that regulatory framework. And I think that's really what a lot of these things are designed. It's sort of a put up or shut up moment. Like, come into the system, we want you in, the governments, or get out, and we're going to sort of run you out.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I think everybody's waiting to see what will happen. Like the major stablecoin company Tether, right, has this like really interesting relationship with the United States, especially because of like our Secretary of Commerce and the relationship there. And it'll be really interesting to see. I think people are waiting to see what happens with Tether. Does it go the route kind of like Binance did, where it had like Binance US, right? And that was supposed to kind of hold and regulate the customers in the US, and then does it have this global entity that just kind of does whatever it wants? The hope is that some of the things that we're seeing, and not just Tether, like Tether's not the only issue, but like the question is what an interesting thing, and I think ACAMS people are probably looking at this more than anyone else in the world, is like we, the United States, are facing a FATF evaluation in early January 2026, right? And so the question is, the administration has moved back on some things that we were out of compliance with. And the question is we're making a lot of moves and it's great, like regulating Genius. But that question of if we regulate Genius, but we don't do enforcement, if we don't actually monitor and see what is the sanctions evasion, what's the AML, what's the terrorist financing that's happening in crypto, just like fiat, right? Because there's just as much disturbing things happening in fiat. But this question of like, America can't just like regulate for innovation, right? It has to be
Mhm.
responsible innovation. It has to be innovation with guardrails. And there is that part in Genius, but what didn't get into Genius that a lot of people were upset about were rules against corruption or rules against conflicts of people in the administration or Congress people being able to do things. That's been a problem ever since Nancy Pelosi's husband made $4.7 million in one day on the stock market. We just find it very difficult to kind of regulate Congress people because they have to regulate themselves, which doesn't happen. But like all of this becomes this like toxic melange of, okay, we've got innovation, we've got regulation, great, but are we actually going to hold the line on AML CFT? Because I think what a lot of people in crypto compliance especially are seeing is there's lots of innovation, but there's also this messaging of, well, AML CFT maybe not so important, enforcement not going to be such a big deal for this administration. So our compliance programs dropping back, pulling back. And we do hear some scary things about what's happening in crypto compliance, where yes, the regulations are there, and yet, but you need enforcement. You need an actual threat of
Yeah.
enforcement for financial institutions to do the right thing. Or you and I know from firsthand experience, the business unit will always win, right? Like it's always compliance versus business, and that tension of what do we do? And I
So I want
think
to I
right
want to
now,
talk now
yeah.
about that because we've got a couple questions coming in from
Oh,
Mohammed
great.
and Tazama around this responsible thing. But I just one follow up on what you just said. I had Andrew Adams on recently, former prosecutor from the Southern District of New York, and one of the things he said that I think will be interesting to see, and I hope this is the case, is that he actually thinks there might be more enforcement in certain cases with this regulatory certainty, particularly out of the Department of Justice, because as prosecutors you want clear rules and you want clear knowing violations of rules. And when the rules are fuzzy, as a prosecutor, you're like, can I prove that beyond a reasonable doubt? So I think it could go either way. We're at this point, but some of the questions coming in are around, so let's talk about stablecoins specifically. I think a lot of people are going to start hearing from their institutions, especially traditional institutions, hey, we want to start looking at this. We want to start exploring. So I'll sort of mix the questions together. Either, what are the sort of risks, financial crime risks they should be looking at with stable coins? How do you think about risk assessment, and or where would you go to sort of learn what some of those are? Where are some good resources if you want to, we can only do so much in our 20, 30 minutes today. Where can they really dig into this?
Yeah, so I actually think the answer to the first question is in the second question, in the
Mhm.
sense that one of the biggest risks, I think, for AFC professionals for stablecoins is the number of people who are behind in this technology and don't know anything about it. So if you think about how many compliance professionals are out there in TradFi, and then the number of people who have moved over to learn compliance in crypto, it is not the same. Like there's a technological difference in understanding how crypto moves, how to trace it, how to use transaction monitoring tools. What does transaction monitoring even look like in crypto as opposed to TradFi compliance? These are very, very different systems, right? And there are people on LinkedIn like Steven Sargent, I know does a lot. Susanna Smalley. There are some like really big Ari Redboard at TRM Labs, right? There are a lot of people who talk about AFC, AML, and crypto. These are all great people to follow. I think one of the, and Steven Sargent's entire account is basically how to become like a crypto compliance professional. And he talks about lots of stuff. And I think you put out tons of content about this. Like if you can pay, there are highly curated courses that will give you certifications, right? I think ACAMS has,
Mhm.
right, like a crypto training. So like this is a great thing. One of the things that I see obviously is one, we don't have enough women and we don't have enough diverse people, right? Like we need people to move into an industry that has unfortunately been portrayed by the media as like a giant Ponzi scam, right? There are really good crypto exchanges. There are really good crypto companies. My hope with Genius is that's like people who work at a bank will consider going to an exchange. People who work in engineering will consider going to a custody company. Like the perception that crypto is just a giant dirty industry, please, if you take one thing away from that, like blank that from your head. We need more compliance professionals to learn crypto compliance because there's not enough of them and they all kind of like move around the same places. So the biggest challenge is having people who know how to do it, right? Because once you know how to do it, it's just like TradFi AML, right? It's same rules, same risk, same, the whole thing. It's just slightly different because of the tech and slightly different tools, but it does require education. I think some of the free places, we have a lot of resources at womenincrypto.org. Owl Explains is a really great free resources that I point some people to. We're working on actually like a tracing course because like it is hard to find this stuff for free. But again, if you are willing to invest, and you tend to get what you pay for. And I'm not saying free courses are bad, but you need to understand if you want quick, curated certification, you're going to pay for that. And that has huge value. If you can't afford that, definitely look at some of the free options, or like our association has benefits. So I say all that to say that there's a lot of options. And I think a lot of us, especially in the former law enforcement world, very much want to make it where cost is not the reason that somebody can't get trained up in learning how to do crypto AML CFT.
Yeah, and I think, shameless plug here. That's why I've created this new group, this crypto and payments group, because I see the need, right? I want to help, and you can become an ACAMS member for like $300 or something like that. My goal is to make this one thing worth all of that, right? Because I recognize that while not an enormous amount of money, it is a lot of money, and I want to make sure that people are getting value. So look, there's a lot out there. I think all of the blockchain analytics companies, TRM, Chainalysis, Elliptic, they all put out great products, great intelligence products. If you want to understand the state of financial crime today, you guys have great stuff. There's good stuff out there, but I think part of the challenge with coming into this space, I think, which makes it intimidating, and which maybe makes people hold off. And you've mentioned crap coin, fart coin. There's hype,
To be clear,
there's
crap coin's not real.
misinformation,
Fart coin is real.
there's AI, there's deepfakes. It's so hard to sort out the real from the not, right? Like, you want to go back, and especially if you're being tasked by your institution to look at this, you want it to be fact-based, but it can be really hard to find facts.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I speak, believe it or not, I actually spend most of my time is shifting now to where I actually speak a lot to TradFi and less to crypto, and more because like people in crypto tend to be gung ho about crypto. In fact, I jokingly say people in crypto need a little bit more Jim Richards in their lives. And Jim Richards is a brilliant guy, but he puts out he's a I'd say a crypto skeptic, right? And so I tell people, like, if you're really pro crypto, you should be reading Jim Richards. And if you're really like pro TradFi and you should be looking at pro crypto, right? And I would like to think, like, I pride myself on trying to be really objective and in the middle, which is why I try to talk to a lot of banks, because I'm like, look, if you do a risk-based analysis and you don't want to bring crypto into your financial institution, your bank, your credit union, whatever it is, that's totally fine. But what really drives me crazy is when I hear from people, oh, well, our BSA officer wants to shut down all ACHs to any crypto exchange because they read an article, about SBF and FTX. And I'm like, okay, here's the thing. There's a bunch of financial institutions that are banking marijuana related businesses, MRBs. And to be clear, marijuana is still federally illegal. If you have done the dance and the needle threading to figure out a risk based approach to bank marijuana, but you're not banking crypto because it's a risk, that's the lack of objectivity and the ignorance and the lack of knowledge that I find terrifying. If you want to do a real risk assessment, I am all for that. But then we have to have a conversation of the difference between Fartcoin and Ethereum, right? Like, you can't just clump all of crypto in one word to summarize an entire industry, right? That's the stuff that's really kind of killing financial institutions. And then for a long time under the Biden administration, we had some people, I most of us publicly talk about the disappointment that Elizabeth Warren has been, but there have been a number of politicians where they put out stuff that you're like, this is just wrong. Like, this is just horrifyingly wrong and crazy biased. And can we have a conversation about real risk versus real opportunities? And to your point, it is terrifying how hard it is to find that. So I think a lot of us who live in that space of wanting to have objective conversations about what is good about crypto and where is the risk, what is good about TradFi and where is the risk, where can these two things blend, and where are they better than the other in some ways, and where is it just same risk, different technology, or same thing we've seen for years, but different name and in a different tech. Like, that's the kind of stuff that we should be able to talk about. And it's just frustrating how often people kind of just manipulate the message for whatever their personal interest or whatever their company's interest is. But we need to have more objective conversations if we're going to get real progress, and especially if we're going to get responsible innovation.
Yeah, and getting back to that risk assessment question. So this is what you have to do, whether it's your institution-wide risk assessment or a customer risk assessment. You have to get very granular with this. You've got to break down the term. Sometimes you got to throw aside the term and say, what is it actually doing? How does it work? Who's using it? And so, because a stablecoin risk, and shout out to Jude asked a question, but Mohammed answered it before we even had a chance to ask it. So thank you for that. That's exactly the type of like interaction. Like he asked what a stablecoin is, and Mohammed responded, it's typically pegged to a currency, one-to-one, functions more like cash. Great. Like, and thank you to Afi for sharing resources. Somebody's like, hey, can you share some of these resources? They already got links in there. So I appreciate that. That's exactly, we got to help each other, right?
Like, as we're talking, right?
See, it's fun when you get in here. So, but the risk assessment, when you get a customer, you got to really look at, okay, now amongst all these types of cryptocurrency, what are they doing? So that's when you got to get really granular with them. And then what are we doing for them? Are we handling their customers' money? That may be a very different risk than if we're doing their payroll and their back office stuff. And so that's where you'll earn credibility by being able, when you go to your senior manager, when you go to your bosses and they tell you to explain the risk, you can differentiate, you can explain it in clear language, and you can say, okay, here's where our risk appetite should be, and here's where it's not, or here's what I think fits with it. This is where we could do this, but we're going to have to invest. We're going to have to go spend a lot more on blockchain technology. We're going to have more people. We're going to do this. So you decide, right? You have the money, but you do that. So I want to turn.
That was so well summarized, by the way. That could have been like a mini crash course in risk assessment for whether your financial institution should consider crypto. I'm going to like steal that entire thing because that is, if you could like just copy and paste that and get that narrative into TradFi, I honestly think so many banks and credit unions would be further ahead if they were having that kind of objective discussion.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I want to circle back. And we've got a few more minutes, so if you got any more questions, put them in here. I'll try to get to some more of them. But I want to circle back to one thing you said about women and having a more diverse cryptoverse, I guess you'd say. Because one of the negative connotations that I'm sure a lot of people, when they hear crypto, which turns them off immediately, is this crypto bro culture, right? Like young dudes with their Lambos. Flashy, misogynist. I could probably think of a few more words that I probably shouldn't say on LinkedIn to describe them, but that was sort of the Twitter public persona for a while. I guess my question is, to what extent does that still exist today? And then regardless of that, I imagine it is, and you mentioned it, it's an industry that we're still the probably large majority are men. Probably a lot of white men, probably a lot of white men from not diverse backgrounds, engineers and other things that, you don't even have diversity of thought within that group. So what's your advice? I mean, this is why I think your organization is so cool, right? Like this is, what's your advice to women out there, to others who maybe don't see themselves fitting that? They don't want to be that, but they think the tech is really cool and they do think it's the future of finance. Like, how do they go about doing it? And what's that journey going to be like?
Well, I started nodding because I thought you were saying this is what your association was all about and what it was created for. I didn't realize you were going to cool, but I'll take cool. Like I will always accept cool. But it is funny to me because it is just a replication of finance bros. Like it is interesting to me, like we went through all of this before, right? Like I have friends who were in derivatives, who were floor traders, who got into banking in like the 80s, right? It was not any easier then. This is literally, we're just going through the same process right now. I will say crypto bros tend to dress in more hoodies. And this is where I think Annalise Osborne's book, From Hoodies to Suits, is the most perfectly titled book, right? Like if there was an award for titles, it captures and summarizes like the entire industry from hoodies to suits, right? But I find it interesting because like just if you ever go on Instagram, there's this fantastic account called Midtown Uniform. And if you live in New York, you can literally walk around Midtown New York, and the Midtown Uniform refers to the finance bro Patagonia puff vest over a t-shirt or a long sleeve shirt and a khaki pants or something. You can see them all. It's like little lemmings. They all dress the same. I saw one in DC and snapped a picture and said, you need to create DC uniform because the finance bros in DC are starting to dress, right? That culture, that's finance. The fact that digital finance had it in the form of hoodies, that's the nature of like tech and finance having a baby, right? So fintech was going to have fintech bros, right? So I say all this to say that nothing is new. It's just a question of creating safe space, welcoming communities. That's what we tried to do with Women in Crypto. Our group is focused on like that professional aspect, trying to get women into the industry. We have a lot of male allies and non-binary allies who are very welcoming, who are like, hey, the water's warm. We want you here. So our male allies, Ari Wedward was our first male member. I always shout him out because he's super passionate. Aidan Larkin, we've had a lot of folks who've joined the association who are very, very visible male allies, right? Stephen Sargent shouts us out all the time. We can't do it without men. I'm a big believer that you can't get inclusion through exclusion. So we have lots of male members, right? And building that culture of inclusion, having safe space, like making sure women know, yes, we're at conferences, yes, we have events, yes, you won't be the only woman there. No, the entire industry is not a Ponzi scheme. Yes, your dad might have some comments if he's read too much SBF FTX articles, but we're happy to explain why this is the future of digital finance. And we need more women because women statistically, if you've ever been to a BSA conference, you know, tons of women in compliance, tons of women in risk identification, risk mitigation. We could spend hours on why there's lots of women in risk identification and mitigation. But when you don't have those voices in the room, I think FTX is a really good example of what happens. One woman in the room who's the girlfriend is not going to be the one to say, hey, we probably shouldn't be doing this. So when you have like a diversity of voices in the room, I think you get better business, better industry, better decisions. And that's why we try to just encourage women like, hey, just be open, look at the companies, look at who's in here, and we're a support network if you're here. Or even if you're crypto curious, we have a lot of women in TradFi who are in the association just thinking of making the shift and wanting to talk with people, get mentoring, networking, etc.
Yeah, and that networking is such a big part, right? To feel like you're not the only one, right? And you guys do a great job of having events all around the world. You've created a space to where, you know, you can go ask your questions and it's a safe space and you don't feel like it's awkward when you're going, right? And you can ask the dumb questions, which we all have, I still have, right? Like, and create this environment because that's how you get in, that's how you break through. So I think you've done such a great job. I'm really proud of the work you've done. Like, it's really great. You and I have
Thank
known each other
you.
for a while, like
I
back from
know.
DOJ, and like, it's really great. And so I'm so thankful. I wish we could talk more, but I promised to keep these
I
short.
know.
So we are out of time. I see a lot of questions we didn't get to, but I will spend some time this afternoon going back through and trying to answer those. But Amanda, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. And I love this crossover event between our communities. I hope we do more of them, and I'm excited to see what you build. So thanks again for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you to everyone who joined. Thank you for your questions. Thanks for your interaction. And we will see you next time, either on ACAMS Live here on LinkedIn or hopefully on ACAMS Connect Crypto and Payments. Thanks, everybody.